This is the Caroma K3. This is a 36 volt, 350 watt. As you can see, scooter. There's no crankset in the front. This is not an e-bike. So, but because it does follow the form factor of an e-bike, I am likely going to slip and call it a bike at several points throughout this video. But when I do that, just ignore me and keep in mind that this is indeed a scooter. And this one, let's just say it's an oddity. There's a lot that I like about this scooter, and they had a lot of really good ideas on this, but they also kind of made one major flub, I think, that is a deal breaker for me. I don't know if it's going to be a deal breaker for you or not, but we're going to go through everything that the scooter has to offer, and I'm going to talk about what I like and what I don't like about it. And as I said, they made a lot of decisions on this bike that were actually really cool, and I would love to see this kind of stuff adopted on actual e-bikes. For example, we've got this rack back here that's built right in. We've seen that on e-bikes before. It's got the padding, but they were also smart enough to include passenger pegs here. I've seen a lot of bikes where they put this padding for seat back here, but they don't put any foot pegs on there for a passenger. So if you got a little kid riding, they could get their feet stuck in those spokes, and that's not going to be fun at all. Also, what I like with the seat back here, they added a hand grip built right into the frame, so you don't have to worry about that. That is the kind of stuff that I like to see, those little like engineering designs that go into things that just make things more efficient and more practical. And foot pegs fold up for easy flat storage. Same up front here, those fold up when you're not using them. I really like this seat here. It's a big, wide, fat, comfortable seat that I'm not going to have to worry about changing out later. And as you can see, I've got it set on the minimum height. Normally when I ride an e-bike, I'll put the seat up a bit higher to give me some more pedal stroke, give me maximum pedal stroke. But since this is actually a scooter and not an e-bike, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to keep the seat right on minimum height. Here's another one of their good ideas. This is a folding basket. You just release this clip here and the basket pops out and you can put stuff in there, and when you're not using it, you fold it right back up and clip it with that little clip there, and it's folded up and out of the way. We got 20 by 3 inch fat tires on this scooter, and we got 180 millimeter disc brakes, but they are mechanically driven. Now, as light as this bike is and as slow as it goes, mechanical brakes are going to do just fine for stopping this bike. We've also got some suspension forks up here, no adjustment. Not a lot of travel, but this is not a bike that's made for being ridden off-road, so this should be just fine. One other thing of note, when you put this bike together, the forks here come flipped around in packaging, and you've got to release this nut here, loosen that up so that you can flip these around. But that was the only difficulty I ran into in assembly, and it wasn't really difficult. It was just kind of, you know, an extra step that doesn't come on most bikes. But yeah, you got to loosen this up here, flip these forks around, and then tighten this back up, and then you're good to go. A little bit of a strange design on the handlebars. They come up pretty high, and as you can see here, the handlebars are all one piece. They're welded here and welded here, so you've got no adjustment. They do have like a little bit of a rise, and I think they're going to fit most people just fine. I don't think they really need adjustment, but like I said, it's a little bit of a strange design. We got really simple controls up here. We got a power button, and once that's turned on, you've got a battery meter here. This bike does not have a speedometer, and I don't think it's going to matter because I don't think most people are going to be riding in a scenario where they need to be tracking their speed. Nobody's going to be riding this bike out on the road. If you do, you're a madman. Over here we've got our headlight control, and that's just a simple on-off switch. And this is our headlight here. That's what it looks like when it's turned on. It's a pretty cheap headlight, gets the job done. And this is a cruise control button here, which I have not tried yet. I'll give that a shot when we take it out and ride it. Metal fenders front and rear, and another 180 millimeter disc brake on the back, mechanically driven, like I mentioned before. So as you'll see, there's no chain, there's no derailleur, there's no crankset up front. So all of that is going to add to the simplicity of riding this bike. It's also going to reduce the weight of the bike. You've got no crankset, no derailleur, no cassette in the back, no chain, so that does take a little bit of weight off. The downside is if this battery dies, you're going to not be able to pedal it home. You're going to have to kick it home, and it's not like a standard scooter. You've got a seat that you set on, so you're not going to stand and kick. You're pretty much going to be stuck pushing this thing home if the battery dies. And now for the battery, and this is what I consider the big deal breaker on this bike. This is only a 5.6 amp hour battery. That is extremely tiny for any kind of e-vehicle, especially one that is this big and this heavy. Now, overall, in the grand scheme of things, this is a pretty light bike if you're talking about like e-bike world, but this is a very heavy, big scooter. I don't know the exact weight on this bike. I think it's around 50 to 60 pounds. I'll put that weight number on the screen right now. But like I said, 5.6 amp hour battery. This thing's going to run dead pretty quick. So I wouldn't expect this scooter to be something that you're going to be using for commuting. This, in my mind, is something for puttering around campgrounds, stuff like that, maybe riding around your back alley streets, stuff like that. But that's about it. This is a serious limitation on this bike. And I mean, if it would have came with like a 10 amp hour battery, now we're talking a 12 amp hour battery, you ride this thing all day. But as far as it goes, this being a 5.6 amp hour battery, that's going to run dead fast, and that is the big limitation that this bike has. And battery being that small is a serious limitation for an electric powered vehicle. This seat pad does come off. You just slide it forward and then lift it out. I might need to there we go. It's got these pins that basically just slide down into these holes. You just put that in there and then slide it forward, and it shouldn't come out. It really takes two hands to finagle that in there, which I'll get that in before I do the ride. But that's the scooter. That's the Caroma K3, and I think I did a pretty good job of mostly referring to it as a scooter and not a bike. But I'm going to take it out on a ride now. I'm just going to ride it around this little public park. This should be good enough for some speed tests and hill climb tests and things like that. As far as a range test goes, I really don't trust this thing to take it too far. I'd say you might get about 8 miles out of this thing depending on your weight. I weigh 200 pounds, so that's going to be my best guess. I would be very leery about taking it too far. Like I said, it's probably going to be the ultimate like campground putterer. So you could put like a basket back here and make little beer runs, maybe throw a couple bundles of firewood in there and go get little things like that. But as far as being a real commuter, this thing is just not built for that. Anyway, that's enough of me yammering. Let's go ride it. All right, here we go. I'm just going to ride around the park here. I got my phone speedometer hooked up so we can test that out. Like I said, the bike doesn't have a built-in speedometer. It's just got a throttle, and that's it. But here we go. It's not got bad takeoff. Now that's on flat ground, paved, but it took off pretty good. All right, we'll go through the gravel here and do a little riding around in the gravel. And this is the benefit that this kind of scooter has over like a standard small wheel scooter. It's going to be able to go through this kind of stuff a lot more comfortably. Now the bike does not have a rear suspension, so it is a little bit of a rough ride back there on this kind of terrain. But the front suspension does a pretty good job of absorbing most of the dips and bumps and things like that. All right, we're going to start off going up this very minor grade of a hill. It does get a little bit more gradual as it goes up, but here we go. Really, I'm surprised at how peppy the thing does take off. It's not a powerhouse by any means, but it does take off with a pretty decent amount of power, and it is climbing this hill, which I'm very surprised at how much hill climbing power it's got. Now, there is another hill over here that is a lot worse, so we're going to go down this hill and try that one next. This hill over here is probably going to be the one that gets it. That's going to be the one that puts an end to the hill climbing tests. But yeah, this hill right here is a lot more steep. We'll go down here and see what it's got for climbing this one. The bike is actually pretty nimble too. So making turns and stuff is not bad, but up this hill here, oh, it's struggling a lot more. You know what though? It did it, so I'll take my shut up and we'll do a top speed test now. There are no like different levels for this. It is just basically full throttle or no throttle, and it looks like we hit 15, 16 miles per hour here, and that is cruising along in just what the throttle's got us. Now we're started going downhill here, so it got up to 17, so that doesn't count. It looks like the top speed on this bike is 16 miles per hour. And after a couple of hill climb tests, we've dropped 1 bar on our battery meter already. And now we're riding against the wind. Yeah, is this bike a speed demon? Definitely not, but it's not as bad as I was expecting it was going to be. It's kind of fun to zip around on the curves with this. It's a little weird not pedaling, setting on something that has an e-bike form factor and not pedaling, but I can see the advantage of that, where if maybe you are, if you have like mobility issues, like minor mobility issues where you can sit on a bike but you really can't pedal, maybe this would be something that would be great for you. And if that's the case, something like that, I could see upgrading the battery. You know, would this bike be worth upgrading the battery on? I would say, you know, by the time you buy the bike and by the time you actually upgrade the battery, why didn't you just buy something better in the first place? But like I said, if you specifically don't want an e-bike, if you have like mobility issues where maybe you're elderly or you just can't really pedal an e-bike, you know, it probably would be worth buying this one and then making the couple $100 upgrade to like a 10 or a 13 amp hour battery. You put a 13 amp hour battery on this bike, you're going to have a lot of fun all day long. But keep in mind that it does have its limitations. But as far as just like puttering around, this bike is going to be just fine for that. I wouldn't call it a commuter though. It does kind of bog down on hills, but you got to keep in mind too that I weigh 200 pounds. A lighter person is going to be a little bit more zippy on this bike, but again, it's a 36 volt, 350 watt motor. It's not going to be a powerhouse for sure. I'm going to pop the side off the controller housing and take a look at the controller later and see just how many amps the controller puts out, but I wouldn't imagine it's very much. It doesn't really need to put out much for what this scooter is. Ugh. Okay, we got some, well, you know what? Here's our off-road test. Man, I hope I don't get a flat tire going through this stuff, but clearly we've had some flooding in the park, and it went right over it, no problem. I guess I can do a little bit more off-roading, just going through the mud here and seeing what she's got. Oh, it's really sloshy through here. Oh boy. Yeah, now if I try to go up that grassy hill there, that's where it's definitely going to fail. It's starting to bog down through the mud already. So, but I mean, it's going. It would be better if I had some pedals to get, oh man, we're down to 2 miles per hour. Yeah, the mud is really bogging this bike down considerably. I hope we can get back on the pavement over here and pick it back up. Oh yeah. Definitely not an off-road machine. But I think everybody knows that already. I think it was never intended to be that, and I think anybody looking at this bike knows that it's not going to be an off-road bike. So keep that in mind if you're going to go to any like beaches or anything with this bike. It's not going to go through sand and snow and things like that very well. But hey, here's our monster hill again. We'll get a run at it. And oh, it's starting to lose some power. It doesn't have the pep that it had when it went up the first time. But the mud, riding through the mud, I think did a lot to draw that battery down. We are at like half battery life already, but keep in mind that, again, like I said, I weigh 200 pounds. We did some hill climbing, riding through the mud, and now it looks like the battery's starting to come back up a little bit, probably after being out of the mud. When I let off the throttle completely, it jumped back up to full. But as far as taking this on any real long range test, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to end up walking this thing back. I would say, given my experience with e-bikes, and don't hold me to this, I would say you'll probably get about 8 miles out of this bike, out of this scooter, excuse me, on a full charge, on flat ground. But you know, your weight is going to factor into that. So I think I could get 8 miles out of it, best guess. But you know, don't sue me if you get less than that. Okay, so for control, I've mainly just been relying on the back brake, and that's been enough to stop this bike. But we're going to do a full brake test now. Not super strong, but they do stop this bike with plenty of power. The bike is pretty lightweight. It doesn't have a lot of power, and I think these brakes are going to be more than adequate for stopping this bike at its top speeds, especially in the kind of situations where most people are going to be riding it, and that would be, you know, campgrounds, your little neighborhood side streets, things like that. Anybody who rides this out on the road is an actual madman. And I'm creeping up a hill here. I can definitely feel that there's some sag in the battery. So after riding it for not very long, it's starting to lose some power. So I'm going to stick with my gut and say that, you know, somebody who weighs about what I weigh is going to get around 8 miles out of this bike. I'm a little curious as to what this cruise control button does here. I guess we're going to find out. I'm going to get up on a flat straightaway here. I'm going to get on a flat straightaway here and give it a shot. Here we go. I'm going to get up to, hey, you know what? We're holding 14 miles per hour now. Let's hit the cruise control button. It has done nothing. Okay. Let's get up to, all right, 12 miles per hour, 13 miles per hour. Now I'm going to hold the cruise control button, let off the throttle. Okay, yeah. All right, so just hold the cruise control button for a few seconds while you're holding the throttle at a given speed, and that's how the cruise control works. So that's pretty cool little feature. So another thing about this bike that's kind of nice is because it is so lightweight, it's easy to control, and it's easy to get control of. Like if you were to lose it, if you just kind of like tap the brakes and start slowing down and put your feet down, you're gonna like instantly get control of this bike. So that's the nice thing. It really is kind of like a bicycle in that regards. This is a bike that, like I said, because it doesn't have a crankset, there's no real need to set the seat any higher, and you know, to get that extra full pedal stroke that you would need from like an e-bike. So this is definitely one of those bikes where it's like I just set the seat down on minimum and ride it like that, and it's really super easy to control that way because you're keeping your center of gravity low, and it's it's kind of fun for just puttering around on. I did notice the last few hills we went up, it was not having it was kind of sagging on the power, but it is still maintaining a top speed of around 15 miles per hour. So that's at, like, this meter over here says half battery life. So we got up to 16 miles per hour. So, you know, it's still got some getting around juice. Okay, final thoughts on the Caroma K3 scooter. Like I said, I think this is going to be a great puttering around the neighborhood, you know, making little runs down to the dollar store, and it's going to be a really awesome little puttering around the campgrounds bike. Beyond that, it's got some serious limitations. It is Pretty fun to ride though, but I really wouldn't expect that you're going to be able to ride it for a very long run. Now, like I said, if you want something in an e-bike form factor and pedaling is an issue for you, this is the bike, but I would definitely plan on upgrading the battery if you're in that situation. Anyway, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.